In the heart of Mji wa Mwangaza, a lively village known for its golden sunsets and rivers that sang with the wind, lived a young woman named Zanira. She was the daughter of a respected trader, a man whose kindness was spoken of in every corner of the land. But fate can be cruel, and when Zanira's mother passed away, her world darkened. Her father, longing to give his daughter a mother's love again, married a woman named Madini. At first, the village rejoiced, believing Madini would bring warmth back into the home. But behind her charming smile lurked a heart filled with envy and bitterness. From the moment she stepped into the house, her eyes burned with resentment towards Zanira. The girl was breathtaking. Her deep brown skin glowed like polished ebony. Her curls cascaded down her back like woven silk, and her warm eyes carried a kindness that melted even the coldest of hearts. Wherever she went, people whispered about her beauty, comparing her to the moon goddess herself. Madini hated it. She hated the way the villagers adored Zanira, the way even noblemen stole glances at her, and most of all, she hated that her own daughter, Nafisa, was constantly overshadowed. While Nafisa was fair-skinned and delicate, she lacked the effortless grace that Zanira possessed. No matter how expensive Nafisa's clothes were, or how much gold adorned her wrists, she could never outshine her stepsister. Determined to break her spirit, Madini turned Zanira into a servant in her own home. From the moment the sun kissed the sky, she was forced to wake up and scrub the floors until her fingers ached, carry heavy pots of water from the river until her arms trembled, and prepare lavish meals that she was never allowed to eat. While Nafisa lounged in silk, Zanira wore rags. While Nafisa was showered with gifts, Zanira received only cruel words and scornful glances. Her father, unaware of the torment, believed Madini was raising his daughter with love, but when he fell ill and passed away, any remaining kindness in Madini vanished. She no longer needed to hide her cruelty. Now, Zanira was completely at her mercy. But even under the weight of hardship, Zanira never let bitterness take root in her heart. She still smiled at the villagers, still helped the elders carry their baskets, still hummed soft lullabies to herself as she worked. Her spirit was like the great baobab tree, strong, unshaken, deeply rooted in kindness. Little did she know, the winds of fate were shifting, and soon, a single moment would change everything. In the heart of Mji wa Mwangaza, excitement filled the air. Prince Kamari, heir to the great kingdom beyond the hills, had arrived. His presence alone commanded attention. Tall, strong, with eyes that held the wisdom of generations. Many had tried to win his favor, but he was not drawn to riches or flattery. He sought something deeper, something rare. For weeks, Madini had been preparing Nafisa for this moment. She was draped in the finest golden robes, her hair decorated with shimmering beads that sparkled under the sun. Every chance she got, she walked where she knew Kamari would pass, lowering her gaze shyly, hoping to capture his attention. Madini had already whispered in every ear that Nafisa was the perfect match for a prince, but Kamari barely noticed her. One evening, as he strolled through the bustling marketplace, something unexpected caught his eye. A young woman, dressed in simple clothes, was helping an elderly woman carry a heavy basket of yams. Though sweat glistened on her forehead, she smiled warmly, speaking gently to the old woman. It was Zanira. Kamari watched, captivated. Her dark curls swayed with the breeze, and her presence was like the first rain after a long drought, pure, refreshing, full of life. He had met countless noble women, adorned in silk and jewels, yet none had drawn him in like this girl in worn-out clothes. Curious, he asked the merchants about her, and each one spoke of her kindness, her strength, and a beauty that was more than just appearance. That night, at a grand gathering, Kamari stood before the elders, his voice carrying across the crowd. "I have travelled far in search of a bride, and now I have found her." A hushed silence fell. Every eye followed his gaze as he turned to Zanira. "Zanira of Mji wa Mwangaza, will you be my wife?" Gasps filled the night air. Madini's face turned pale, her hands gripping Nafisa's arms so tightly that her daughter flinched. Nafisa, who had spent the entire evening trying to impress the prince, felt her stomach drop. This couldn't be happening. Zanira stood frozen, her heart racing. All her life, she had been treated as nothing, forced to serve, to remain unseen. And now, the most powerful man in the land was offering her a future she had never dared to dream of. She glanced at Medini, whose expression twisted in barely contained rage, and at Nafisa, whose jealousy burned through her forced smile. For the first time, Zanira saw something new in their eyes: fear. Medini quickly stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. "Your Highness, surely there is some mistake. Zanira is just a simple girl. My daughter Nafisa is—" Kamari raised his hand, silencing her. "I have made my choice." Medini's lips pressed together, her face twitching with barely concealed fury. She had no power to object. The prince's word was final. Around them, murmurs turned into cheers. The people had seen Zanira's kindness for years, and now justice was unfolding before their eyes. Zanira, still in shock, finally found her voice. With a deep breath, she met Kamari's gaze. Yes, a roar of celebration erupted, but in the shadows, Medini's nails dug into her palms. She would not let this stand. If she could not stop this now, she would find another way to ruin everything. The wedding was just a day away, and excitement filled the air. People from every corner of the land had come to witness the grand union between Prince Kamari and Zanira. The entire kingdom was decorated with colourful fabrics. Lanterns glowed under the night sky, and musicians played joyful melodies in the streets. But inside one home, where jealousy burned hotter than any flame, Medini's mind was twisting with rage. She had tried everything to change Kamari's mind. She had dressed Nafisa in the most dazzling gowns, spoken highly of her beauty to the royal messengers, and even spread rumours that Zanira was unworthy. But nothing worked. The prince's heart was set. Zanira, the girl she had treated like a servant, was about to become royalty. Medini could not let that happen. As the night grew quiet and the household slept, she crept towards Zanira's room. The dress lay folded neatly on the wooden table, shimmering in the dim candlelight. It was the most beautiful gown she had ever seen, woven with golden threads, decorated with tiny pearls that sparkled like stars. The very sight of it made her blood boil. How could a girl she despised so much wear something so magnificent? Without hesitation, she grabbed the dress, her hands shaking with fury. Slipping out of the house, she hurried to the backyard, where the remains of the evening fire still smouldered. Her heart pounded as she fed the fabric into the flames, watching as the golden threads curled and blackened. The pearls melted, turning to ash. The fire crackled, almost as if laughing at her wicked delight. Medini's lips curled into a smile. Tomorrow, when Zanira woke up to find nothing but ashes, shame would consume her. How could she stand before the prince without a dress? The royal family would be humiliated, the wedding would be called off, and Kamari would have no choice but to choose another bride, Nafisa. It was the perfect plan. She watched until every last piece was destroyed, then scattered the ashes into the wind, making sure no evidence remained. With a deep breath, she wiped her hands, her heart finally at ease. She had won. Tomorrow, everything would crumble for Zanira. As she slipped back into the house, she glanced at the sleeping girl one last time. The poor fool had no idea what awaited her. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Zanira stretched and sat up, her heart fluttering with excitement. Today was the day she would leave behind a life of cruelty and step into a future she never imagined possible. With a bright smile, she turned to the wooden table where her wedding dress had been carefully placed the night before, but the table was empty. Her smile faded. A strange sense of unease crawled up her spine as she scanned the room. Had she moved it? Was someone playing a trick on her? She rushed to the corner of the room, checking every surface, every fold of fabric. Her breath quickened. Something was wrong. Then she noticed the faint smell of smoke. Her eyes followed the scent to the open window, where a small pile of blackened ashes lay scattered on the floor. Her hands trembled as she stepped closer, kneeling beside the remains. The delicate pearls, the golden threads, everything had been reduced to dust. Her wedding dress was gone. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. and her chest tightened. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. This had to be a nightmare. A cruel laugh broke the silence. Zanira turned sharply to see Nafisa standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, a smirk stretching across her face. She leaned lazily against the frame, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Oh, dear sister," Nafisa said mockingly, "where is your beautiful dress? Did the wind carry it away? Or did someone finally realize a girl like you doesn't deserve to wear something so grand?" Zanira's throat tightened. Nafisa knew. She knew. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She clenched her fists, trying to steady her breathing. If she broke down now, Nafisa would win. Such a shame. Nafisa continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "How will you stand before the prince now? How will you walk down the aisle in rags? The whole kingdom will laugh at you. Maybe it's best if you just disappear before the ceremony. Spare yourself the humiliation." Zanira felt the weight of those words pressed down on her like a boulder. She had dreamed of this day, of finally escaping the torment of this house, of stepping into a new life, and now it was slipping away. But as she looked up at Nafisa's gloating face, something deep inside her stirred, a fire that refused to be extinguished. She would not give Madini and Nafisa the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Taking a slow, steady breath, Zanira rose to her feet. She wiped her hands against her skirt, brushing away the last traces of ash. Nafisa's smirk faltered for a moment. Zanira met her stepsister's gaze, her voice calm but firm. "You think this will stop me?" Nafisa blinked, caught off guard. "The wedding will still happen," Zanira continued, "and I will walk down that aisle, with or without a dress." Nafisa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her. Zanira turned away, her heart still racing but her mind set. She had lost the dress, but she would not lose herself. If they wanted to see her crumble, they would be disappointed, because no matter what, she would become Prince Kamari's bride, and nothing could take that away from her. Zanira stood in the middle of her small room, her heart pounding. The ashes of her wedding dress lay scattered on the floor, the smell of burnt fabric still lingering in the air. Any other bride would have collapsed in tears, but she refused to let despair consume her. Nafisa had wanted her to break down, to run away in shame, but Zanira was not weak. She would not give them that satisfaction. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. If she could not wear the dress that was meant for her, she would create one of her own, a dress that no fire could destroy, a dress that would show everyone that she was stronger than the cruelty thrown her way. Without wasting another second, she rushed outside, her bare feet brushing against the cool earth. She knew exactly where to go. The towering palm trees behind the house had leaves, strong yet soft, perfect for weaving. She tore them carefully, gathering as many as she could carry. Next, she ran to the riverbank, where golden beads from broken necklaces had been discarded over time. The villagers often found them in the sand, washed up by the currents. She picked each one with care, slipping them into the folds of her skirt. Then, just as she turned to leave, something caught her eye, a flutter of colors, delicate, shimmering wings dancing in the sunlight, butterflies. Dozens of them rested among the wildflowers, their wings glowing with shades of gold, blue, and deep orange. Zanira held out her hand, and to her amazement, one of them landed gently on her palm. It was as if nature itself was blessing her. She smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. These butterflies would be the final touch. With the gentlest hands, she collected wings that had naturally fallen to the ground, making sure not to harm the beautiful creatures. By the time she returned home, the sky was painted with hues of pink and gold. She worked tirelessly, her fingers moving with determination. She wove the palm leaves together, creating a flowing gown that fit her perfectly. She carefully stitched the golden beads into patterns that shimmered like the sun. And finally, she placed the butterfly wings along the neckline and sleeve, their delicate colors glowing against her skin. When she stepped back to look at her creation, a lump formed in her throat. It was breathtaking, a dress not made of silk or pearls, but of strength, resilience, and the beauty of the earth itself. As she slipped it on, she felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just the girl Medini had tried to break. She was Zanira, the woman who refused to be defeated, the woman who would walk down the aisle with her head held high, proving to everyone, especially Medini and Nafisa, that no amount of cruelty could take away her worth. Tomorrow, when she stood before the prince, she would not be a broken bride. She would be a queen in her own right, and no one could stop her. As the sun began to rise over Mji wa Mwangaza, the village buzzed with anticipation. The royal wedding was about to begin, and people had gathered from far and wide to witness the moment. The air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers. Drums echoed in the distance, and the grand courtyard shimmered with decorations fit for a future queen. But no one was prepared for what they were about to see. Guests turned eagerly toward the entrance, expecting to see Zanira in the luxurious gown that had been prepared for her. Instead, a hush fell over the crowd as she stepped forward. Gasps filled the air, and all eyes widened in astonishment. She was breathtaking. Zanira walked with grace, her head held high, wearing a gown unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The flowing fabric was woven from delicate palm leaves, moving like silk with each step she took. Golden beads caught the sunlight, sparkling like tiny stars scattered across her body. And then there were the butterfly wings, stitched so beautifully into the dress that they seemed to flutter with life, their vibrant colours glowing under the morning light. It was as if nature itself had wrapped her in its embrace, blessing her with an ethereal beauty that no riches could ever create. She did not look like a bride of misfortune. She looked like a goddess walking among mortals. Prince Kamari, standing at the altar, felt his breath catch in his throat. He had always known Zanira was special, but at this moment, he saw her strength, her resilience, her ability to turn pain into something extraordinary. His admiration for her deepened, and a proud smile spread across his lips. Meanwhile, in the crowd, Medini and Nafisa watched in horror. This was not the humiliation they had expected. Instead of looking like a fool, Zanira had become the most mesmerizing bride the kingdom had ever seen. People whispered in awe, admiring her creativity, her courage, her undeniable beauty. Even the royal elders nodded in approval, murmuring that she was a bride truly chosen by fate. As she reached the prince, the drums slowed, and silence fell over the gathering. Kamari extended his hand, his eyes filled with nothing but admiration. "You are more radiant than I ever imagined," he whispered, his voice laced with both love and respect. Zanira smiled softly, placing her hand in his. She had walked through fire, through cruelty, through loss, and yet here she stood, stronger than ever. And as the ceremony began, one thing became clear to all. This was not just a wedding. It was a moment of triumph, a story that would be told for generations. The day when a girl who had been treated like nothing rose above them all, not in revenge, but in grace. As Zanira and Prince Kamari stood together, hand in hand, the crowd erupted into cheers. The wedding had been unlike anything the kingdom had ever seen, and whispers of Zanira's breathtaking gown and unbreakable spirit spread like wildfire. But amid the joy and celebration, dark clouds loomed for those who had plotted against her. The moment the ceremony ended, the royal elders stepped forward. Their wise, watchful eyes had seen enough. Rumours had reached them of what had happened the night before. The burned dress, the cruel laughter, the wicked intentions. Kamari turned to face the crowd, his sharp gaze sweeping across the gathered guests. "Before we celebrate any further," he announced, his voice echoing through the courtyard, "there is something that must be addressed." The crowd fell silent. Kamari's eyes locked onto Medini and Nafisa, who had been standing in the back, hoping to blend into the shadows. But there was no escaping what was coming. The prince had seen their hatred. He had seen how Nafisa's face twisted with jealousy, and how Medini's lips curled in suppressed rage when Zanira took her vows. "Last night, a terrible act was committed," Kamari continued. "Zanira's wedding dress, meant to symbolize her new beginning, was burned in secret." Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was not an accident. It was done out of spite, out of jealousy. And we all know who is responsible. All eyes turned to Medini and Nafisa. The colour drained from their faces. "My prince!" Madini began, forcing a trembling smile. Surely this is some mistake. Enough! Kamari's voice was sharp, cutting through her excuses like a blade. I have heard the truth from those who saw what happened. You tried to shame Zanira, to humiliate her on the most important day of her life, but instead, you revealed your own ugliness. While she turned hardship into beauty, you let your hearts rot with envy. Madini fell to her knees. Please, my prince, have mercy. I was only… Mercy, Kamari's jaw tightened. Did you show Zanira mercy when you forced her to live as a servant? When you mocked her? When you tried to ruin her happiness? Madini had no words. Nafisa clutched her mother's arm, panic in her eyes. You are unworthy of this kingdom, Kamari declared. From this day forward, you and your daughter are banished. You will leave at sunrise and never return. A shocked silence followed, then murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Justice had been served. Tears of fury and fear streamed down Nafisa's face as she realized there was no escaping their fate. Madini, for the first time, had nothing left to say. As the guards stepped forward to escort them away, Zanira stood tall, watching without hatred, only relief. She had won, not through revenge, but by simply being who she was. And now, she could finally step into the future that was always meant to be hers. With Madini and Nafisa gone, peace settled over the kingdom like the soft glow of the morning sun. The people rejoiced, not just because justice had been served, but because they had witnessed something extraordinary. A girl who had once been treated as nothing had risen above cruelty, and now stood as their future queen. Zanira ruled beside Kamari with the same grace and strength that had carried her through hardship. She did not let power change her heart. Instead, she used her experiences to guide her. She understood pain, loneliness, and the feeling of being unwanted. And so, she made it her mission to ensure no one in the kingdom felt the way she once had. She opened the palace doors to those in need, welcoming orphans and the poor, offering them shelter and education. She worked with the people, listening to their struggles, solving their problems with wisdom that came not from books, but from life itself. She treated everyone with kindness, from the highest noble to the simplest farmer, and in return, the people adored her. But it was not just her kindness that made her legendary. It was her love story with Kamari. Their bond became a tale passed down through generations. The prince who had chosen a woman not for her wealth or status, but for her heart. And the girl who, even when stripped of everything, created beauty from ashes. The dress Zanira had woven from palm leaves and butterfly wings was preserved in the palace, a symbol of resilience and hope. Mothers told their daughters about the queen who never gave up, who turned cruelty into strength and misfortune into triumph. As the years passed, Zanira and Kamari's love never faded. Their kingdom flourished under their rule, becoming known not just for its riches, but for its justice and compassion. And whenever people looked up at the palace, they did not just see a queen. They saw a woman who had once been powerless, but had rewritten her destiny with courage. And so, Zanira's name was never forgotten. She was not just a queen, she was a legend. One evening, as the golden sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the palace, an elder from the farthest corners of the land arrived at the royal court. His eyes, deep with wisdom, held a knowing glimmer as he stepped forward to greet Queen Zanira and King Kamari. The court fell silent as he raised his weathered hand, pointing towards Zanira's wedding dress, now displayed in a glass case as a symbol of her resilience and strength. With a voice like the whispering wind, he spoke, "This dress is no ordinary creation. It carries the spirit of the land, the power of nature itself." Zanira's eyes widened. She had crafted it from simple elements, palm leaves, golden beads, and butterfly wings, never imagining it held anything more than her own determination. But the elder smiled knowingly, as if he had seen something long before anyone else had. "The palm leaves you wove were not just leaves," he continued. "They came from the sacred trees that have stood for centuries, their roots deep in the wisdom of the earth. Only those with true strength can wear them without them withering." Gasps echoed through the court. Zanira listened, her heart pounding. The golden beads you found by the river, the elder went on, were once part of an ancient queen's necklace, lost to time. They did not find their way to you by accident. They recognized the spirit of a true queen. Zanira's fingers brushed over the beads on her gown, now understanding why they had shined so brightly under the sun. But most powerful of all, the elder said, his voice lowering, were the butterfly wings. He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto hers. Butterflies do not simply give their wings to just anyone. They are messengers of transformation, symbols of destiny. They chose you, Zanira, because you were meant to rise. A hush fell over the room. Kamri turned to Zanira, his admiration growing deeper than ever before. The people of the court murmured in amazement, their respect for their queen reaching new heights. Zanira's throat tightened with emotion. She had thought she was alone in her struggle, that she had built her own strength from nothing. But now, she realized, she had never been alone. The earth had been watching her, guiding her, blessing her from the very beginning. The elder took a step back, bowing deeply. Your journey was never just about survival, my queen. It was about destiny, and nature itself has crowned you. Tears shimmered in Zanira's eyes, not from sadness, but from understanding. She had never needed riches or royal blood to be a queen. She'd always been one, and now the world finally saw it too. Generations passed, but the tale of Queen Zanira never faded. Elders sat beneath ancient trees, whispering to wide-eyed children about the bride who turned ashes into beauty. They spoke of her strength, her kindness, and the magical dress blessed by nature itself. Her story became more than legend. It became a lesson of resilience, proving that true power lies not in riches, but in the heart. In every corner of the kingdom, her name lived on, a symbol of grace over cruelty, of light conquering darkness. And so, the world never forgot the queen who turned pain into triumph. Thank you for watching this incredible story of resilience and triumph. If you loved Zanira's journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. And before you go, check out these other amazing stories. Just click on the videos on your screen. You won't want to miss them. See you in the next one.